This is Ray Stokes, the curator in the Special Collections Division of the TCOM Library. Today, the 31st of May, 1990, it's my pleasure to welcome here in the studio of the Biomedical Communications Division a very dear friend of mine I'd like to welcome and recognize at this time, who not only a dear friend, he's also has been a mentor and even a past boss that I've had down through the years. I'd like to welcome Dr. George J. Luibel, D.O., here in Fort Worth, the GP since about 1946. And Dr. Luibel, we're happy to have you here and try to pick your brain a little bit. You know, you and I went through this back in July 1981, but we weren't under quite the lights then that we are today, because it was audio and no video back in those days. But I want this to be the second time around for both of us. And in order to kind of update our so-called audience for posterity, we hope, that I'd like to just take here a copy of a current oral history collection health science library brochure, and reading what we have here in a little resume, in order to keep not being too repetitive, just read to record about George J. Luibel. Dr. Luibel was a co-founder and chairman of the TCOM Board of Directors from its inception until the college became state-supported in September 1975. The Fort Worth GP shares the, and we quote, moments of sheer joy and deep despair, unquote, he experienced in bringing the dream of an osteopathic medical school in Texas into reality. His memoirs cover the early years of TCOM, from the granting of the charter from the state of Texas in 1966 until the graduates of the first class in 1974. He was active in professional politics and is a past president of the American Osteopathic Association and the Texas Osteopathic Medical Association. As I've already stated, Dr. George, you were interviewed on the 9th of July, 1981. Now then, I know something has happened to you. You've received many presentations, many accolades, many awards, and many achievements down through these last 9 years, prior to the ones we've already accredited you to. I know of one offhand that I'm proud that you received, and I know you'll get a chance to say something about it, and that's this award that you were given in 1988, 1999 as the Educator of the Year, given out by the National Osteopathic Foundation. Now then, let's go back and let you do a little talking. Tell us, after you were interviewed in 1981, a short time after that, you became a member of the board of the Tarrant County Health. What's the proper name of the governing body of the John Peter Smith Hospital?
Well, it's the board of the John Peter Smith Hospital is the I forget how to even say it. We use it so seldomly, but it's the Tarrant County Hospital District, which is the political subdivision that runs John Peter Smith Hospital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was been on that board approximately 10 years. And
well, then, were you on it in '81 when
yes,
I interviewed you last?
Yes,
I didn't recall that. Okay.
And so
how do you get selected to the board?
Well, I think
Or
in my
elected?
case it was a political accident. The then chairman, the appointments to the Tarrant County Hospital District Board are made by the county commissioners. Yeah. Each commissioner has one appointment, so that means the 4 of them now, since we have 9 commissioners on there. There were only 7 when I went on. But the others are made by the judge with the concurrence of the rest of the committee.
The county judge?
The county judge, yes. And Judge Moncrief appointed me to the thing. He had been friendly with the profession and was looking for somebody to appoint to the thing. And my friend Roy Fisher,
Who is Roy Fisher?
Well, never mind. We'll get around to that sooner or later.
Okay.
He told the judge he ought to appoint me, and the judge did, and fortunately nobody overturned it, so I've been on this thing ever since, until now. I think my time is up this month, was probably the conclusion of my last appointment.
Then you're winding up a 10-year
Well,
tenure
I haven't
then.
had anybody tell me to hang on, so
Yeah.
I imagine somebody else will be appointed.
I see.
But
Let's see, English is the county judge now, is that
yeah,
correct?
Roy English, and he is not going to run for re-election, so he will be out of office the 1st of January.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been a very interesting experience, and of course when I went on there, well, I was the first DO to be connected with Peter Smith in any fashion, and they didn't know what to do how to handle me or what to make of me.
I see.
And I think I finally got around to proving that DOs don't have horns and are not totally ignorant about the practice of medicine.
Yeah.
And so we have been working hard ever since, sometimes with and many times without the concurrence of this institution, to get some of its students in there one way or another.
Right.
And finally, and this is something I wouldn't take credit for, but finally there are 5 of them over there in this past year in the postgraduate educational
Yeah, our
program.
graduates, yeah.
Yeah, your graduates.
Yeah.
And as you recall, the TCOM clinicians had to institute a suit against Peter Smith because when I went on the board, they had a rule that you had to have a 2-year postgraduate program after your medical college education. That was approved by the Medical Commission for approving postgraduate education. They've since changed the name of that. So we went into federal court where we won this suit, and Peter Smith incidentally furnished me my own attorney since they felt that I didn't agree with the majority of the board on this. And it was a put-up job just to keep DOs out of the place, and they had a board that they could manipulate, that is the medical community at Peter Smith.
Yeah, I was getting ready to ask you who they is.
Well, that's who they is, or they was. Fortunately, we think some of them was instead of is, and the atmosphere has changed.
Yeah.
Personally, I always got along with everybody fine over there, except when we got on the subject of osteopathy, and I had one view and they had another, and I was a minority.
Right.
I was such a minority originally with the 7 board membership that I couldn't even get anybody's second emotion, even to discuss something. Then they enlarged it to 9 members, and we got a few people who had a different point of view about the whole situation. One particular lady, Viola Tibbs out here in Como.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm familiar with her.
And well, Viola's cousin's daughter graduated from this institution and is practicing over in East Texas now.
Oh, you mean Beverly Wadlington?
Beverly Wadlington
I didn't know.
is Viola's
Well, I didn't
cousin's
know that.
niece, or cousin's daughter.
Yeah.
In fact, she and her husband, little boy, were there in El Paso. I saw them on
them.
Saturday
First time
night.
I'd seen her in several
And
years.
so she came over to talk to me, and because I'd heard Viola talk about the girl, but I never had met her.
Yeah, right.
So Viola took the position that she'd been discriminated enough that she wasn't going to vote to discriminate against anybody. So we were often running to.
Yeah, well, good.
While we didn't run all the way, we made a lot of dents in their armor, and one of their past chiefs of staff said that their best intern of this last year was the first young lady from TCOM, Audrey Jones. Said she was the best intern they had in the whole place.
Well, now that's interesting, and I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to try to publicize that as much as we can. You know, of course, it's kind of hard, you know.
Well, you can't probably get somebody to be quoted publicly
No,
on
that's
that.
right. That's right.
But I think the point is that once DOs got into the place as residents,
Yeah.
why they proved the point that they were capable of practicing medicine intelligently and being scholars in a program of postgraduate learning.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the fact that we have 5 of our graduates there, and of course Audrey and I forgot the name of Jim, Randall, I think his name is. They were the first 2.
They were the first 2.
And then this last year, in '89, there's 3 more. So there's 5 that are there now. Have you heard? I haven't heard about this class of '90 that'll be graduating Saturday. Whether there are any of those going to
I haven't heard that they were. I think
haven't either.
Peter Smith, I think, said, I thought I heard the Chief of Staff say that they completed their enrollment in the Family Health residency program out of the matching grants, but whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I see.
And they hadn't been doing totally good with that. That's been sliding around a little bit.
Well, you know, the first time that I had any experience with the situation over TCO at Peter Smith, back about 1972, you used to send me over there when you were chairman of the board here. When we were a private school, you used to send me over there just to observe, just to look and to listen, and which I tried to do, and then convey what little information I could. That was back, like I say, 72 and 73, I believe it was.
I think that ought to be an ongoing thing. I think somebody from TCOM ought to be in that audience every time they have a public board meeting, just to be seen and just to make sure they understand that.
Well, have you told anyone but me that particular?
Oh, I've told that around here.
Have you?
More than once, yeah. And it flies for a few months and then it dies down again.
I see.
And I know people around here are so preoccupied and committed to all the things they have to do here that they don't realize that something like that takes time too. And it took 10 years really to make a break in the wall, and it may take another 10 years to get the thing fully cooperative.
Right.
And of course, I know that the allopathic doctors over there, and they're all on contract, very well paid contracts.
I see.
And I'm sure that they're have second thoughts about DOs coming in there and maybe ultimately getting their job. And I think that's the basis of a whole lot of reasons. Of course, they hide behind their affiliation with Southwestern Medical School always to do that, and Southwestern comes through for them in a pinch, and I think someday we're going to have another suit to break this up.
When does that contract ever expire?
Well, it doesn't expire until one or other members of the board the school. It is not a continuous contract, but it stays in effect until one or the other reviews it and decides they want to talk about altering it or
and offer a 30-day notice or something of that sort. Yeah.
Maybe it's 6 months.
6 months. Yeah. I see.
But
then there actually is never no renewal date, has there?
No, it doesn't ever get renewed. Anytime I've been on this board, they really haven't ever talked about it. Because they had the majority, and if they didn't want to talk about it, well, you couldn't get it up talked about. And I don't know, unless you had the proper mix of board members that were open-minded about it, that it would have done any good to talk about it.
Well, and before we leave the subject of Peter Smith, what is your projective thoughts about our relationship? What do you foresee in the future?
Oh, I think ultimately, as TCOM achieves more status in the eyes of the general Fort Worth public, which it hasn't done yet, and make some of the leaders of the community, or persuade some of the leaders of the community this is too valuable an asset within the community to ignore, and that they're not going to get any credit any way, shape, or form from for Fort Worth by Southwestern Medical School, which is totally a Dallas-oriented place, and it should be. That's where they get their money and all.
That's right.
And until that happens, I don't think you're going to change things to any marked degree, but I think once that ever takes place, there's going to be some very significant changes in Peter Smith's relationship with TCOM. One thing that did happen a year ago, the board instructed, because I appointed an ad hoc committee to look into this thing, and one of the things that came out of the ad hoc committee was that when they announced their graduate openings, their residency openings, and that they'd been going around to the other allopathic schools in Texas and trying to recruit, that they had to come here too and make their pitch to the TCOM graduates.
I see.
So I think that
Well, now that's quite an accomplishment.
that was a pretty good accomplishment in that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not doing it, why, I think TCOM ought to arrange to get them jacked up to
Well, I would think
get
so.
back to what we told them to do two years ago.
Well, and somebody ought to run shotgun on that or something.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's my place to run shotgun
No,
on
it isn't. It isn't.
And,
It should emanate on the 8th floor here on in administration.
Sure, this is for the benefit of the students of TCOM, and it's not for my benefit. I don't
Right.
get any money. All the time I've been on the Peter Smith board, I've never got paid. I don't even get a $10 meeting like the city council
Oh, you
does.
don't?
We don't get anything. We get lunch, that's all.
You get lunch, yeah. And you probably you don't wind up with indigestion after lunch, I don't hope.
No, they always have good lunch.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, then let's leave for the time being, unless you happen to have a
No.
thought about Peter Smith in the
Well.
future. Let's leave over and move on to something else. You mentioned a moment ago about the recognition we may or may not have as far as city fathers and city officials and city citizens, as far as Fort Worth citizens, as far as that's concerned. We've talked a lot in the past about identity and another word that goes along with identity slips my memory. You got to have identity, and you got to have something that goes with it for recognition. What is that other word? I can't even think of. The two I's I've always talked about, Dr. George. You ought to remember one of them.
Probably should. The only one I can remember is identity, and importance probably would be the other one.
Well, importance is a good word. All right, let's use the two I's. But no, really. Of course, you can have image is the word I'm trying to think of.
And image.
Image. In other words, you can have identity without having much of an image.
Yeah, that's Peter Smith's problem.
Yeah.
I've said that ever since I was on the Peter Smith board. You got to get a better image in the public eye to get recognition for what you're doing, and I think TCOM has the same problem. They're doing a great job in educating young men and women to be physicians, but the general public doesn't perceive that in the light that they should. Now, there's a lot more people know about TCOM certainly than did 20 years ago, and they have a higher opinion about it than they did 10 years ago.
Right.
I think the tall buildings changed their mind.
I think so. We're here to stay.
Yeah. But
far cry from the bowling alley.
at the same time, but the bowling alley was still a good building.
It was a good building.
Better than Southwestern had for 16 years.
It sure was.
And nobody should let themselves be downgraded by any of the allopaths that make snide remarks about it, because the bowling alley, of course, we didn't have the bowling lanes in there and all. We just had a great big building.
That's right.
It was like a supermarket building, actually.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So I wonder if we'd have started around the other way, where the grocery store is there on Camp Bowie, if everybody said, well, we started in a grocery store instead of a bowling alley.
Instead of a bowling alley.
They probably would. But I hope that they can keep building on their image and keep working on the leaders of the community to really come across with some absolute appreciation of them. I think a lot of these people, if you talk to them, they'll give lip service to the thing, but they won't give any real devotion or real commitment to helping TCOM.
Well, you know, one thing that I feel like we have shown a marked improvement in, or an advance in at least, in the 10 years, almost 10 years that have elapsed since we talked before, is the inroads that we've made into research. Of course, I'm not in that, I don't have the capacity to know what they're talking about when they talk about research, but you do.
Well, not much. I was in a conference in this time last week in Chicago.
Yeah, is that why you went to Chicago last week?
That's why I went to Chicago for a committee that has funding to enhance funding for the Bureau of Research. And the committee consisted of 3 former TCOM board members.
Is that right?
Yeah, John Burnett was the chairman of the committee, and Wayne Stokes and I were the 2 members on it.
Is that right?
And well, of course,
Wayne's. I'm glad to hear Wayne's still active in the hospitality profession.
He's going to be here tomorrow night for the graduation banquet.
Bless his heart.
He said he'd.
You know, I've been trying to get an interview out of Wayne now for several months.
Well,
I've got to corner him.
Yeah,
I surely
maybe
do.
if he comes in early enough.
Well, probably can't tomorrow, but
probably
surely
can't
the man
tomorrow.
can afford to come back.
Well, he goes back and forth to his place in Arkansas all the time. He can stop off here and do that.
Certainly.
And I'm sure he would.
Well,
if you
yeah.
just
Well, I
invited him.
haven't been able to talk to him directly, but I've talked to him through other people 2 or 3 times. So
write him directly and ask him. After
I
this.
already have.
Yeah, but the thing that really what I wanted to say about this, we were looking at some of the money in the NOF Research Fund, and we pointed out, Wayne and I, that TCOM had more money in their research grants this year than the AOA's committee had.
Is that right?
Yeah, and we may have embellished it a few $100,000 in telling all those other people sitting around there about how much they had, but you know, they've got about $4 million, I think, in their research grants currently in the college here.
Right.
And that kind of shocked our listeners, because they wanted a program where, or one element wanted a program where everybody's grants and foundations would kind of melt all this thing together. And I said, well, you couldn't do that, because they're all started for different reasons in different parts of the country, and they're all directed at different target groups, whereas AOA is going to have a national-wide program and image to collect any money. Yeah. And they've got to look to somebody besides the pharmaceutical industry to give them the money, too.
Right.
And so do we here.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of foundations, you serve on the TCOM Foundation.
Yeah.
And are you still on the University of North Texas, they call it now? Are you still on that foundation also?
I'm the secretary of it.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Well,
I've got another year to do that.
Another year.
I thought I was relieved of that, but they asked me to stay on.
A number of years ago, I had some connection with it and so forth, and I knew a little bit about its operation. But
they've been raising money pretty good, and they've got a new crew up there in the development office, a fellow they got down there from University of Maine. And they've raised a lot of money in the last 2 years. I think around $6 million.
Is that right?
Toward their endowment fund.
Right? Well, that's something we
something
know.
for the.
We need that here at TCOM very badly.
We do.
We really do. Of course, we're at a disadvantage at the time being, because we don't have a head of the development section.
Well, that's true, but you know, whoever comes in here to assume that office has got to be given the time to work on development primarily, and not on everything else.
That's right, absolutely.
And in addition to that, the general conception of raising money must be understood that the profession gets about wrung out on the money they can give, because everybody in the profession ask them for some money, you know.
Mhm.
And the great contributions to medical research and medical education have not come from physicians. I don't care whether it's the allopathic school of medicine or the osteopathic school of medicine.
Mhm.
It's primarily come from lay sources, business sources, wills and bequests, and
That's right.
all those
Some
sort of
type
things.
of estate planning.
Prime type of estate planning. And
Or, I should interject this thought, a good patient, a friend of people like George Luibel.
well, yeah, that.
Oh, you've
that's-
done your share, I can
that's-
tell you that.
Well, I didn't really know one of them was even coming. The patient never said anything to me about it, just sent it down here,
Yeah.
and they called me up and wanted to know if I knew who that was. So,
Do
but
you recall in that instance who that was?
yeah, I can't tell you the lady's name right now, but she lived out here in Westover Hills, and she
Yeah.
left $100,000
Good.
to TCOM here.
Unrestricted?
Yeah, it was unrestricted.
Yeah.
And I think the Fleming estate's $250,000 that is in process of being transferred to the college is unrestricted too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I knew that was to come to us
Yeah.
ultimately, because Charlie Fleming told me that when he drew up his will,
Mhm.
and that was when we were in our early stages here.
What was the lady's name? It was your patient that used to give us increments of $10,000 at a time.
Um,
I can't think of her name, but she died long back, about 1977 or 78, somewhere in
Mhm.
there.
I know
She's
who.
alive. I've got her name as one of our sustainers up on the 8th floor,
She wasn't named.
but I can't think of her name.
She wasn't named Fleming.
No, it wasn't Fleming.
No, she
No,
wasn't.
no.
But yeah, I know where her house was. That I used to go and see her, and
Now, I think that's a different person than this lady you're telling about.
Mrs.
the 100
McQueen. Mrs. McQueen.
Yeah, McQueen. That's who
that-
gave us the 10,000
gave
every
us-
now and then. Yeah, several
She
times.
gave us $10,000 a year for
A long time.
several years, right when that was a lot of money to us.
That's right. I think about $80,000 in all.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And that foundation still gives some money, but I think most of it's been going to the hospital in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, there's a great demand on that benevolent dollar, I'll tell you. It
Oh,
reminded
yeah.
me of all the demands that were placed upon the House of Delegates out at El Paso. Everybody wanting this, that, and the other, and they're all justifiable causes.
Yeah,
But
but that's why I meant a few minutes ago when I say the profession is already zapped for about everything it can stand up to, because
That's right.
every segment of the profession wants money. You know, Dr. Burnett and I were talking about that coming home, and he said, you know, every time I go to a meeting, I come away losing another $100 to somebody that they wanted a contribution.
well, you know, I'm a little embarrassed in that same vein. I understand they're trying to raise a little money to refurbish a certain room around here and call it the Edna and Ray Stokes room, but they need some money.
Yeah, well, I expect that you'll have to get out and start panhandling a little bit.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
Well, I know it is, but get somebody else to do it,
Do it
for you.
Very good.
That's the trick in doing it.
Well, do you
But-
have any any suggestions about, and hearing again, without trying to be, of course, criticism is criticism. We hope that it's usually always constructive, because we can always make some improvement out of certain criticism. But have you got any words of wisdom to pass along to the 8th floor that you haven't already done, or to repeat?
Well, you know, I remarked about something when I walked in here today.
Yes, you did.
I walked past several people, and I think they were all students. And while I was not ignoring them, none of them ever offered to speak to me or smiled at me, and I smiled at some of them as I walked past them, or nodded or something, and they totally ignore it.
Yeah.
Now, I think that those kind of people aren't going to make good co-workers throughout the profession for the rest of their lives. And maybe it's because they're going to a state finance school that they don't think that they need to pay attention to anybody, you know. But I can walk through North Texas where I don't know anybody either, and more students will speak to me than they would around here.
Is that right?
Well, it's true. It's not right.
No.
but I think that this is their school and they're on the campus. But when they see strangers walking around, and I'm a stranger to them, I don't expect them to know me because I don't know any of them.
Right.
But I think they ought to be courteous to strangers and maybe indicate can they help them find something, or are they looking for somebody? And I think if that did that, it'd flow over into the rest of their association with each other. And they need to practice doing that, because when they go out and practice and try to set up in business for themselves, they're certainly going to have to do a little handshaking and smiling around to get people to think they're nice enough to come to see as a doctor.
That's right. That's right.
And if you don't get the habit when you're young, you're probably not going to develop it when you get older.
You've learned a whole lot since you practiced down in Ferris, Texas, haven't you?
Well, I started out in Ennis, Texas.
Yeah, and then Ferris, and then back here.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't in Ferris last night. They must have been right in the middle of that 3-inch rain belt.
I understand there were. Even Mansfield caught pretty close to 3 inches.
Joshua caught 3 inches of it last night.
Yeah.
Poor Dr. Coy's farm may have got soaked out there, you know.
I hope there wasn't any hail involved, though.
I didn't hear anything about that, and I didn't see anything in the paper about it this morning.
Yeah.
But, I think TCOM has come along marvelously, Ray, and I'm sure you couldn't, starting out in that one-room office you had downtown, never could imagine us sitting in an environment like this with all this sophisticated equipment. I don't either. And you asked me about all the, how did you express that? The distress, the despair.
Valley of Despair, mountaintop experiences.
I'll tell you, we were in the Valley of Despair a lot of times. I can remember more of those points than I can remember the mountaintop successes.
Right.
And a lot of our problems were just plain putting out brush fires among our own professional people.
Right.
And, I think that our people who talked big, when they were actually presented with the idea, here it is, we're going to do this, that scared the life out of them. And the reason they opposed going any farther with it, they just couldn't face the idea that it might fail, or if it was on our hands and we had a medical school, then we could quit hiding behind our minority status and saying, well, if we had this or that like the rest of them, we could do just as much. Well, here you are, you've got it now, so there's no point in hiding any farther. And one of these editorial or viewpoint writers or national correspondents writing probably it was in the Dallas News recently, and it was one of the black men writing that the fact that things weren't being racist as much as all these black critics would say. He said too many of them are hiding behind the status quo of their minority position to keep asking for something, or because they're not willing to go out and try to operate on their own. And that their leaders too often are promoting the minority status for their own benefit rather than promoting the fact what the black people have actually accomplished in the last 25 years and how much farther they can go on their own. And I think that type of thinking explains what we ran into in our early days with this, trying to start this college.
Comparison.
So whether they'll like it or not, that's the best comparison I can draw up.
Well, yeah.
But at the same time, this school, I think, was obviously destined to be, and I believe you'll agree with what I'm going to say now, that every time we were in a hopeless position, a door opened for us to walk through. and one that we couldn't see ahead of us,
That's right.
and one that we
Absolutely.
had no idea what we were going to do. And
From a sandstorm or a rainstorm right into sunshine.
something always bailed us out one more time. And so
Right.
I don't think that anybody should have any, what do I want to say? What kind of an opinion am I trying to say here? I don't get words together like I did 25 years ago.
No,
when
neither
we
one
were,
of us did.
when we were talking to people about this thing.
Yeah.
But nobody should have a minority opinion or any kind of what's the word I'm trying to use? Secondary thoughts about it, or feel like they're a secondary outfit because they have come from TCOM. My goodness, they've got all the equipment and all the personnel and all to teach more about medicine than anybody in 4 years can learn and remember.
That's right.
And they obviously are doing it. The whole profession in Texas should look at this with pride and continually think about moving forward and doing something. But on the other hand, if we don't do our own stuff that's different from the allopaths, we're going to fold up and dive.
Getting ready to ask you what you thought about those who are graduating today actually applying the osteopathic technique or philosophy.
Well, I don't know how many of them do. I get the impression from the public, people that come into my office and say they're not doing it to the extent that they
Well,
should.
from my association with alumni in the past, a majority of them aren't, or not. But I can name you a dozen that I can, off the top of my head, that are.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
There are always going to be people that are, and people that actually believe in this profession. But there are also people, unfortunately, who didn't enter TCOM because of their affection for this profession. They were just wanting to be a doctor, and they couldn't get in anyplace else. I know that for a fact, and I know that those kind of people never intended to practice osteopathic medicine. They wanted to practice what they saw that came through the allopathic journals, or what came through the detailed presentations from the pharmaceutical representatives, and that's what they practice. And you know, the laying on of hands that we have been practicing for 100 years is still a very necessary thing, and we know so much about the musculoskeletal system that the allopathic people don't know, that we shouldn't take a back seat.
That's right.
Or have any kind of inferiority complex about our position, because we can do a lot of things for patients that isn't being done otherwise. In fact, some of the things that are being done are laughable and crude by any osteopathic standard. And you know, in spite of, we must have some benefit in what we're doing, and must have real merit in it, because our adversaries have been trying to put us out of business since 1890, and they haven't succeeded yet. So for heaven's sake, let's don't commit suicide.
Right. Well, that's quite an admonishment there, but it's certainly one worth listening to.
Well, I'm just saying what I believe, you know. I've been a member of a minority medical school for over 50 years, or member
You
of a
graduated in '36 from
Yeah.
Kansas, from
Kirksville.
College.
And I've never, I haven't liked all of the treatment that you get as a minority, and I've felt that it's been unjust, and I felt that depriving us from hospital privileges and some of the other fixtures of the public health program that were denied to us at times in the beginning was an injustice, and was wrong and was illegal. But, you know, a majority in the world always gets the ability and the credit to do more than is justified in by right to do, and that's what's happened to us. But I hope that we didn't grow so fast in the last 20 years that we grew away from our heritage, because if we did, we're going to end up like the homeopathic school and the eclectic school and the other MD school that closed up in Cincinnati the year I got out of Kirksville. They all gave MD degrees, but finally they were all absorbed or beaten out of existence.
Speaking of degrees, it's not a degree, but you're still a very active fellow in the Academy of Applied Osteopathy, aren't you?
Well, I'm still a fellow in the Academy, but I haven't been so active. You know, one of the problems was that when we were going through the early problems with TCOM, they were always having their meeting by the time we had to have a board meeting here, and I felt that this was more important to the profession than me being in Colorado Springs in March anyway. I thought that was kind of a stupid way to have a...
Is that still where the headquarters are, Colorado Springs?
No, they're in Newark, Ohio, which is about 30 or 40 miles east of Columbus. And because the girl they turned over the management of it happened to live there. So they had their meeting this spring in Cincinnati.
You know, my first introduction just to knowing about it was Dr. Barnes.
Oh, yeah, when she was here, when she came down here.
Pretty well acquainted with her. That's about the time I was hired.
And that whole organization had a different emphasis and different goals and aspirations that it has now.
Yeah, I see.
Frankly, I think they've gone downhill more than they've gone uphill since that time.
One other thing I want to, we've alluded to, and that is, or mentioned, is that you had the honor of, and you've had many honors that you certainly deserved down through the years, but one that I'm sure you're probably very proud of was one of your more recent honors was being the Educator of the Year by the National Osteopathic Association, what's it called? NOL.
Yeah,
Foundation.
the National Osteopathic Foundation.
Right.
Well, that was a freak thing, Ray, and you know that.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
TCOM had the
It was our time around.
Our time around to nominate somebody, and they nominated me. And I'm very pleased that they did. I don't know why they did, or not that
I think your credentials in the past would warrant that.
Well, maybe so. Anyway, to my amazement, when I did go to Miami to the AOA convention or the House of Delegates to receive that award,
right.
Why, I was sitting there on the sidelines, and some of my old acquaintances would come over and say, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm just kind of visiting," because they weren't supposed to tell anybody until they actually got me up on the stage and said, "This is the man.
Right.
This is the nominee."
Right.
And so in due time, Gilbert Buckholz, who from Toledo, who was sitting beside me, went up and said what they were about to do, nominate the candidate and present the candidate to them for the award. And then he called me, see, and I went up on the stage, and to my surprise, the whole house stood up and applauded, see, so they weren't still all mad at me for some of the things maybe I had to tell them they could or couldn't do when I was president.
Right.
But we didn't have any of those that amounted to anything anyway, I don't believe. But and it was a very enjoyable year, but I heard somebody say in Chicago last week that that deal was about to be phased out.
Oh, is that right?
They don't think they're getting enough return for the expense, I guess,
see.
that it costs.
Well, in other words, it was Oklahoma's time this year, isn't it?
Yeah, but he'll be ending up in July.
Oh, I see.
He has been all year, the Oklahoma man. He succeeded me.
Right, right. So in other words, they just won't continue it then?
Of course, I think one thing they're doing wrong about this thing, we used to have a stamp that was used as a Christmas seal or a period of the year.
I've got the first 50
Yeah.
up in
And I think when they switched away from that and started putting people's names on the thing and start putting it out with no particular time of year goal and just hoping everybody'd buy them and use them throughout the year, that they lost a lot of steam out of it.
Yeah, they really did.
And
they had a pretty good
they had
snowball going there.
yeah, and I don't know why somebody decided to improve on it, because I don't think they really did.
Right.
And I hate to see it go out, because it's the only pitch to the profession that actually provides for student loans and research money. Though most of the doctors can't understand that. They can't understand the difference between the auxiliary scholarship program and the SEALS program. So it's a question, again, of educating your friends instead of your enemies shooting you down.
I see.
So,
Well, Dr. George, before we conclude this little visit together this afternoon, is there any last particular thoughts that you have about the last 10 years of in other words, you've been close to the school, but still you've been at a great distance.
yeah, well, of course, it's obviously had many drastic changes, simply because it's had space in which to change, and it's had a big enough campus that they could have everybody here. They didn't have them split up like we did during the Lend-Lease years with North Texas.
North Texas, yeah.
And that was a survival thing, though, and we would have never made the grade probably without it.
I think Jeter Nolan ought to be given more credit than he's been given.
Oh, yeah. Nobody gave Jeter credit enough.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be this would not be a state institution today if it hadn't been for the lobbying of Jeter and his cohorts from North Texas.
That's right.
In the legislature. They got the votes that we needed, because they had a lot of presence that we didn't have.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
North Texas today has 85,000 alumni, and I think TCOM. This is one thing. I think TCOM ought to be acting like we're blood brothers instead of just distant relatives. Because if you can got 85,000 people that think you're part of their family and will root for you, don't ignore it.
That's right.
Those are votes,
Well, that's real words of wisdom, and I'm glad you said it.
Yeah. Of course, one other thing that is causing a problem, and I don't know that I have the answer to it, and certainly I don't see the answer at some other higher circles, is the exodus that graduates here and other allopathic medical schools are taking from osteopathic postgraduate educational opportunities. But the students have suddenly, the doors have been opened up to them to go to many places that were never available to me or my cohorts in the old days. And in spite of AOA's refusal to put a stamp of approval on them, the kids are voting with their feet, and they're going where they think they're getting the best deal. And I think that's something that AOA has to come to grips with and find a solution that will please everybody.
Well, I noticed the incoming president of AOA in his remarks out at El Paso was alluding to that.
Yeah. But certainly, if the people in this institution and every other osteopathic institution in 4 years are indoctrinated properly and understand the precepts of the profession which they've spent 4 years trying to achieve a degree in, if you're going to lose them all in 2 or 3 years of graduate education, then there's something wrong with the way you taught them, and or else there's something wrong with the ones you select to be taught. So I don't know how anybody's going to come to grips with that problem either, but I sure hope they can, because I think it's going to be the salvation of the profession. I don't see a lot of new osteopathic institutions being built with the current hospital climate, the way the government and the business world is trying to curtail the cost of hospital medicine.
Right.
So people are going to have to go to other institutions ultimately. So,
Well, Dr. George, it's been a pleasure to
well,
renew some visit, or to have a visit with you and renew some of our thoughts in the
Yeah.
past. And
I don't think we said anything world-shaking here this afternoon.
well,
but,
maybe not, but
But
100
it's-
years from now, you never can tell.
anyway, some of those ideas were important to the years we lived through. Anyway,
Well, it's certainly a pleasure to have you with us today. As I've already stated, the 31st day, the last day of May 1990, and I believe our class of 1990 will be graduating here in about the next 48 hours.
They sure
So
will.
it's a pleasure to be with Dr. George Luibel on this day in the studios of the Biomedical Communication Division of the TCOM Library.
well, thank you for inviting me.